Singapore, Sir Tony Blair. Very nice. You have been, Mr. Blair, to ASEAN many times, more than we can probably count together. And I'm very interested, based on the various conversations that have been happening here at Asia Summit, what is the state of ASEAN?
First of all, thank you very much for having me at the Milken Institute. It's a great pleasure to see you all. Thank you, Richard, for doing this interview. The state of ASEAN right now. Oh, thank you.
Well, there you go. It's like a double espresso.
Yeah. Actually, you can take over and do the interview. Probably do a better job. But state of ASEAN right now, yeah, pretty good, I would say. I think Asia's doing well. I mean, my institute works now in this region. We've projects in Indonesia and Vietnam, the Philippines, and one or two other places. Yeah, I think it's in pretty good shape, but it's got the same challenges that everyone has, which is that there's a huge amount of change going on, technological change particularly, and how do you keep up with it? And then geopolitics is pretty difficult right now. And from the business people I speak to, whether in Asia or over in the West, I think they're more worried about the politics than they are about the economy in some degree.
Yeah, I worked in Singapore for 5 years in banking over at Citibank, and I was talking to one of my old mentors, and we were discussing the interesting position that ASEAN represents to the world. And as you know, through the Institute and the work that you do in 40 countries, there's something special about this space in that it's a bridge to the East, to the West, to the big, to the small. But maybe its strength is because of its great complexity and diversity. But does that also hold it back because it can't come together and consolidate in its own way? It's a very interesting place.
Yeah, but I think the thing that will push ASEAN closer together over time is the reality that is changing the relationship between countries in a region. And that thing is the fact that by the middle of this century, I think you will have three giants, three superpowers. I think there'll be America, there'll be China, and probably India. And these countries, by dint of their population and size of their economy and their technology, possibly, will be just more powerful than any other individual nation. And then underneath that, and you've got those three giants, and then you've got what I call the tall countries, of which Indonesia would be one, and Brazil would be another, but they're still, by the way, not giants. Right? And then you've got countries like the UK and Germany, Italy, France. You know, we're medium-sized countries in terms of our population. And even though we may be in the top 10 of economies, over the years, as the giants advance, our economies is going to be significantly smaller. Right? So you've got the three giants. You know, when you've had a long experience in dealing with politics, you realize that at the very top level of geopolitics, it's a pretty straightforward business. You know, if you are a giant, you tend to sit on people who aren't, which is unfortunate but true, right? And therefore, if you want to avoid being sat on, and instead you want to sit at the same table as the giants, you've got to come together regionally. I mean, this is why, without revisiting the Brexit issue in the UK.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
But that's why in the end, you know, people say to me, well, Europe's in crisis. Europe's going to always be in crisis, okay, of one sort or another. But what will hold Europe together in the end, and why countries are still trying to get into the European Union, and no one else has wanted to get out of it, is because otherwise, Europe on its own, the individual countries, they're not strong enough. And that's just the reality. So when it comes to ASEAN, yes, you've got countries, Indonesia, it's going to have a population of 300 million or more. You've got Philippines and Vietnam, over 100 million people. There's large population countries in the region. But China's over 1 billion people. Even with the demographics in China changing and come down a bit, it's still going to be one of the largest population countries in the world. India's population is liable to rise to 1.4.
Yeah.
Right. And just to put that in context, that is the population of Europe and America put together and doubled virtually. So when you look at the way the world's going, ASEAN, it will find over time that it needs to cohere even more, because otherwise, economically and politically, it's going to struggle.
Yeah. Very interesting. Lots of questions based on what you just said, Mr. Prime Minister. First of all, you remember when you were Prime Minister, the term that was often used when discussing this part of the world, many of you remember this. Maybe we were being lazy. I think we may have been. The idea of Chindia. That's like an age-old term. You just mentioned 3 superpowers in the world. Why are each of those going to be superpowers? And I'm guessing you're going to say for different reasons.
Well, for different reasons, but they've all got things in common. Look, America, I think we were just discussing this before we came in, but I think the strange thing about America is that, I don't think this is controversial for Americans, but
Go for it, please. We want to hear it then.
American politics is a little dysfunctional. No? I mean, yeah.
He's a gentleman, as you can tell.
Okay. So his politics is a little dysfunctional, let's say. But over the past few years, I think America has reemerged as easily the strongest country in the world. I mean, by far. Its economy is extraordinarily resilient. Its technology is top. You know, who's the biggest oil producer in the world? America. Who's the biggest gas producer in the world? America. You know, who's got the most powerful military in the world? Again, by far, you know, America. So America is, I think, you know, whatever the dysfunctionality of its politics, its economy and its technology, its military, very strong. The interesting paradox is when you come to China, you would have to say its politics are entirely functional, right? It's clear who's in charge, and that's, you know, that gives a certain clarity of direction, let's say. But actually underneath, I think there is quite severe problems. Having said that, on any basis, China is going to remain a huge power. And as technology, you see, the Industrial Revolution broke the link between population size and GDP. And so, you know, Britain was the world's most powerful country at the end of the 19th century, despite its population obviously being much less than China. China was the world's largest economy at the end of the 18th century. Technology is reestablishing that link between population size and GDP. So China will be, for all the reasons we know, a powerful country. And then India, I think, is finally taking its place on the world stage and is just going to grow in power. And I think when you go to India now, and we have projects there, you know, you feel there is a confidence amongst the Indian population and a vitality that, you know, it's going to be hard to resist.
Mr. Blair, you have written about 2 of those superpowers not being best friends, non-besties, if you will, and that is the United States and China. And you have actually characterized it as being the biggest threat for us having a global war. What can stop that?
Well, good leadership can stop it, because the consequences of it will be absolutely devastating for everybody. Okay. I mean, my view about China is, well, first of all, I should say, one thing I've learned since leaving office is how little I know about certain things and issues. And it's a great lesson in humility once you understand that the areas of your ignorance are as important as the areas of your knowledge. And, you know, I don't pretend fully to understand China, and I think there's a risk always in the West that we try and see China through Western eyes and don't see China through Chinese eyes. And partly because a member of my family's married someone Chinese, I get actually more understanding from her than I do from reading a lot of papers about it. But I think the problem, obviously, for the West with China today is that when I was in office dealing with Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao,
Right.
there was a very strong feeling that as China evolved economically, it would evolve politically, and evolve politically in a direction that was not liberal democracy, but would be steps in that direction. Whereas what's happened in China over these past few years under President Xi is that the Communist Party has reasserted its control internally, and externally, China has become more aggressive in asserting itself. Having said that, I always say to people, that's what it is now. But if you look at China's history, post-1949 and the creation of the People's Republic of China, it's gone through many iterations. So don't assume that what it is today is what it's always going to be. It may evolve again. Therefore, my view is, because China's got a right to be a powerful country, and Chinese civilization is a great civilization, right? And the Chinese people are exceptional people. So I think the most important thing is for the West to be strong enough to deal with whatever comes out of China, but stay engaged. I don't agree with the idea of isolating China or disengaging from it. I think we need to keep the links, but with our eyes open.
Let's move from Asia to the Middle East. Just in the last 24 hours, as you know so well, Mr. Blair, Hezbollah has called the recent explosions of pagers and others an act of war by Israel. And this is a space that you worked on throughout your entire career in politics and after you left as prime minister. And I know you advise many leaders in the region, and so not necessarily you can express everything that you know and that you see, but help us understand, because you remember 2006 when you were prime minister with the Hezbollah-Israel war, and you worked to try to mitigate the outcomes of that. From what you did back then, what might still work today?
Yeah, so you're right that I come often to this region, but I probably, since leaving office, I think when I was in Israel and other parts of the Middle East last week, it was my 270th visit since leaving office. So we have an office in Israel and 2 offices elsewhere in the Middle East region as an institute. There's the immediate, and then there's the long term. In the immediate sense, the most important thing is to find a way of bringing the Gaza war to an end, because that is at least the stated reason why Hezbollah then launched a series of attacks in the northern part of Israel. And not least for, obviously, the condition of the people in Gaza, which is shocking. We need to find a way of bringing that conflict to an end. We can maybe come to that in a minute. But the second thing is to understand what underlies all this. And this is just my view, right? You will find different perspectives from different people in the Middle East. But underneath all of this is really a question about the Middle East and how it develops. And I think the single most divisive issue is the role of religion in politics. Because all over the Middle East right now, you have a battle not just around the Israeli-Palestinian issue, but around what I would call the concept of the religion of Islam and Islamism. The religion is the religion, but Islamism is the politicization of the religion. It's the turning of the religion into a political ideology. And you can see this play out all over the region. And you've got the Sunni version of Islamism, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, and then you've got the Shia version, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that is, Iran's influence within the region and its use of proxies, whether Hezbollah, the Houthis, who have also been attacking Israel recently, and obviously Hamas, even though Hamas is actually a Sunni organization. That is, underlying all of this is that question. And you have, quite apart from the Israel-Palestinian issue, you have within most countries in the region now that battle being fought. And the interesting thing, if you look at the UAE or Saudi Arabia, is that you have leadership there that is deliberately trying to take their countries out of the idea that you take a religion, turn it into a political ideology, and back to the idea that Islam is a religion, it's between you and your God, and there's no reason why you can't get on with people of different religions. So the battle within the Middle East is for religious tolerance and rule-based economies. And this is the underlying problem that is there, of which this latest Israeli-Palestinian conflict or Israel-Hamas conflict is the latest manifestation of it. But I don't think you're going to solve this problem finally until you solve that issue. Now, in respect of the conflict in Gaza, I think there are ways out of it, which people are working on. But it's got to be brought to an end soon, because otherwise the escalation will happen. And I think even though people don't really want an escalation, I think the chances are now, if we don't find a way out of the issue in Gaza, we will find ourselves in a new and really dangerous situation.
Has the United States taken its eye off the ball? In the newsroom over in New York at 30 Rock, off air, we'll often talk about trying to put together the election along with what's happening with the Hamas-Israel deal. And then this morning, the Wall Street Journal comes out and says, according to U.S. officials, the deal is dead during the Biden administration. If that is true, is it because President Biden did step aside in this election that has weakened the ability to come out with a deal before the year's end?
I don't think so, frankly. No. I mean, I think the deal is not dead, by the way. I mean, it's still possible that you will have an agreement, but the agreement is simply around the first stage of a hostage deal. And that first stage is supposed to then lead to a second stage, which ends the conflict. In my view, the essence of the issue is who runs Gaza after the conflict. Right. And let's agree it shouldn't be the Israeli Defense Forces. And from Israel's perspective, but also from the perspective of many Palestinians, it can't be Hamas either. So I don't think you can resolve this conflict until you resolve that question.
The UN General Assembly, as you and I were talking about, they've just started. Next week is the high-level meetings. I understand you will also be in New York for that. One of the big topics as we move to Europe, clearly, is Ukraine and Russia. Or you have met and seen Vladimir Putin, again, many times. You know him. Is he discouraged by what is happening today and the progress or the lack of progress from his perspective that he is having in Ukraine?
Yeah, sorry, this is a really cheerful part of your...
I bring lots of smiles to the Milken Institute.
Yeah, you can't really describe all these subjects as lighthearted. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I've no idea what he thinks because I've not discussed it with him. But you know, in the end, there will have to be a resolution of the conflict there, but it's got to be one that doesn't reward the aggression that started the war.
Will it be years long, you think? Do we have another 5 years of this?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I think we've got to try and bring it to a conclusion because, you know, if you look at the last year, there's not been a huge amount of change in the positions. I mean, okay, there's been changes, but the fundamentals haven't really changed. Mm-hmm. And for the Ukrainians and for the Europeans, it's just important to realize that this was a democratically elected president. Ukraine has chosen the future that it wants, which is which is a future in Europe and a future in NATO. And, basically, the case of President Putin is that he should decide that for them. And, they don't like that. So
Would you vote for Ukraine to be part of NATO?
I think in the end, Ukraine is going to want to be part of NATO for for the reasons that we can just see. And so I think exactly what security guarantees you give Ukraine in the end, I think that's a matter the leadership will continue to discuss. But for Ukraine, even if there is some disputed territory, they will want to know that they've got a path to European membership and that they have some form of security guarantee. Otherwise, they'll feel they're going to be back in the same position again. And, for other Europeans, they worry that if the Ukraine conflict ends in a way that is in any sense rewarded Russian aggression, then that will encourage Russia to do further things. And, I actually, we're not off the record here, but okay, but I'll say this anyway.
You're talking to a journalist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, what am I thinking of?
What are we doing? I don't know. Yeah. Wake up.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually remember having a conversation with Putin about Ukraine when I was still in office, and saying, look, we've got no strategic interest in pulling Ukraine towards us. So just to reassure you, if Ukraine wants to go with you guys, that's fine. And his view was very, very clear. I'll never forget the conversation. He said, no, they're coming with us. I said, yeah, obviously, if they choose to come with you, that's fine. And no, not if they choose. And I'm afraid that's where the problem is.
It shows the duration of the time that he's been thinking about this, the years and years. And we're 10 years into this. We think it's only about 2 years in. We are 10 years into this military conflict in Ukraine. But you've definitely described the non-binariness of this question.
Yeah, and by the way, it's really important because I think from the outside world, a lot of people say, well, maybe the West provoked Putin and so on, and they never pay proper attention to Russia. Honestly, this is not true. When I was prime minister, it wasn't the G7, it was the G8. Russia was there. In the meetings of NATO, we used to invite Russia to be there. We were constantly trying to reach out. The first meetings I had with Putin were in St. Petersburg. He always wanted to be there because it's the Western-facing part of Russia. And, we had great hopes. I remember some people in Europe even talked about Russia joining the European Union eventually. So I'm afraid, part of the risk is, and if I have any worry about China, it's this. All countries today in a fast-changing world have got to make deep reforms. And in government, the hardest thing you will ever do is make change and reform. Because you're taking on systems that are complicated, you're taking on interests that are very strong, and changing a country, reforming its economy, reforming its public services, the way it works is really tough, right? The risk is, where a leader has absolute power, is if they find that too difficult, they default to nationalism. And the substitute for the reform becomes this feeling that you whip up amongst the people of, the world's against us, but we're going to stand up for ourselves. Nationalism takes the place of reform. And I think that's really what happened with Russia, because the truth of the matter is Russia should be a good part of the international community. Russia's got enormous potential in its economy. You've got a lot of really smart, capable young Russian people, but unfortunately many of them are now leaving. So it's tragic, actually, but let's hope that in time things can get better.
I want to move to the cheery part of our conversation. Longevity.
Well, I'm glad you say it's cheery.
Yeah, yes.
It's not what I felt when I woke up this morning with jet lag.
You haven't heard my question yet.
Right.
How does it feel to be 71?
I know, that's a bad question. That's... I have a friend, actually, who works in California on all this longevity stuff, and, every time I see him, I say to him, get a move on. But, What were you going to ask me?
How's it feel to be 71?
No, yeah, what's it like being 71? Yeah, well.
That's okay, yeah. Yesterday we had 2 very good sessions on the very idea of longevity, and as you know, at the Milken Institute, attacking a lot of important issues that drive our society. One of the takeaways that I got from sitting in on the sessions was when we look at the care economy, much of it is untransacted, much of it is fractured, much of it is not known necessarily. How do you see the care economy and the importance of it?
The care economy
Yes.
being
Healthcare, it could be hospitals, it could be caregiving, family caregiving, which is the untransacted space,
Yeah.
the paid caregivers.
Yeah, the thing with longevity is, I mean, looking around the room, most of you are younger than me, but the thing about it is, you're very I mean, I remember having this conversation with Henry Kissinger when he was in his 90s, and I said to him, Henry, people really want to carry on living a long time, and he said, yeah. He said, when you're in your 90s, he said, yeah, no, you'll be very happy to carry on. So, but the truth is, it's about the quality of life that you have. I mean, I think what most people think is, yeah, no, I'd like to live longer, but provided I'm still fit and have still got mental and physical capacity. And I think all of this is going to get absolutely transformed by medical science. I think we're living in a hugely exciting era. We haven't really talked about this, but in my view, leave aside all the geopolitics we've been talking about, the single biggest thing for any government today is to work out how to understand, master, and harness the technology revolution. And one part of this will be around AI and drug discovery, which should get revolutionized. It's longevity, if they're able to work on it, won't mean that we live forever. It just means we live for longer, but healthy. And I think also in respect of healthcare systems, we're going to have the ability today to move from cure to prevention, that we will have the ability to do much more early diagnosis. Genomic sequencing will give us a whole lot of data about our health and how we handle it. And you'll have things like, annual injections for cholesterol. You'll have the ability through blood tests to catch a lot of cancer early. So I think we know much more about nutrition and diet and exercise than we ever did before. So I think all of this is going to be, astonishing in its scope. There will still, however, be people that need care, and, there will be, I think technology will help with that, but there will be no substitute ultimately for certain people, at least, but to have caregivers. And we're going to have to decide at a certain point in time. I hope technology allows us to do this, where we realize that these people, who are often some of the most poorly paid people in our society, actually deserve to be some of the most highly paid. In a rational world, that's what will be happening. And maybe technology, because it can allow us to do things much more efficiently, will allow for that too.
Many will agree with you. I want to stay in the neighborhood of cheery and now move to the U.S. elections.
Yeah. So what's going to happen?
Have you watched any of the debates?
Yeah, a bit.
Okay. How did Biden do?
Sorry?
How did President Biden do?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, really.
And how did former President Trump do?
Yeah, well, the question in my mind is, to what degree will it influence the election ultimately? And if you're trying to get out of me who I think is going to win, the answer is I haven't the faintest idea. And if you're trying to get out of me who do I hope will win, one thing you learn as British Prime Minister is to steer clear of those questions. So just we can move on to the next one then.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier too. The idea of when you were Prime Minister over the 2 millennia that you crossed, right? We had major world cataclysms that you had to deal with. And in the United States, as you know, we call it the October surprise, something that may happen in the next month that will offset the election. Any ideas or thoughts based on what you see across the world, both in the economy as well as in international politics?
Nope. Not really. I mean, I honestly haven't the faintest idea. There might be something. The thing about something that's completely unexpected is that if I was able to answer that question accurately, it wouldn't be unexpected.
Yeah, that's true. You write about 3 levels of leadership. And in your book, I found it to be, first of all, very logical and practical in terms of if I wanted to become, for instance, a world leader, and I don't plan on wanting to do that, don't worry. But you write about these 3 different levels, and you have also said in the past, you wish that you were at level 3 when you were at level 1. And explain this to me.
Yeah, so, I mean, I wrote the book, I could have written a book that was 4 times as heavy and 3 times as long and several times more boring. But I decided just to write it in sort of short chapters, just based on what I learned, not just as being British Prime Minister for over 10 years, but in all the work we do with leaders around the world. And I think leadership, by the way, is the same, whatever walk of life you're in, whether you're running a country, a company, a community center, managing a football team. And I describe these 3 stages of leadership that are born out of my own experience. And the first is you come in, you're fresh-faced, you come in, you know nothing, and you're really willing to listen. And that's the first stage. So you've got a very open mind. Second stage is you've been doing it for a time, you get very confident, you think you know everything, and you stop listening. And the third stage, which you've got to try and get to, is the stage of maturity where you realize there's a lot you know, but you realize there's a lot you don't know. You understand the difference, and you start listening again. And yeah, the mistakes are made in stage 2.
You've done a lot of thinking, and we're just about to wrap up, but I wanted to get your thoughts on artificial intelligence. You have brought this up in just about every interview that you've done and keynote that you've presented. The idea of artificial intelligence is there are smarter people in this room have done a lot of research on it, but on a very basic level, what is missing from the record books that AI is pulling from? What is it that we need to put on the record books so that AI can serve society better?
Well, look, first of all, you're right. There are people a lot more qualified than me in this room for sure. And my children always tell me that I shouldn't talk about technology in public. So I was actually some time back. I was asked to give a speech on cryptocurrency. So I've phoned my oldest son, who's in the technology business, and said to him, explain cryptocurrency to me. So anyway, he gave me an explanation. I didn't understand a word of it. So he then sent me this booklet that was entitled The Idiot's Guide to Cryptocurrency. And I read it, and it obviously attained a high level of stupidity because I couldn't understand it either. And I finally phoned him on the morning of the event and said, look, what do I say to these people? He said, tell them you're sick. So I think with that disclaimer, right, I think that artificial intelligence and generative AI and time artificial general intelligence, I do think it's a revolution. And I think for government, it should revolutionize its processes. Because government's all about process, and AI's got enormous potential. And the more data we generate, the more artificial intelligence is going to get smarter and better. And so I think, if I was back in government today, this would be number 1 on my agenda, other than all the short-term politics or the geopolitics. There would be this issue around technology, because you should be able to reimagine completely how the state works. And the only way out of the developed world conundrum, which is high levels of spending, high levels of taxation, but quite poor outcomes, and the only way out of the developing world conundrum, which is how do we accelerate our development, is technology, and in particular AI. So I think it offers this enormous possibility, And the one thing I sort of plead with the politicians that I meet today is get into a dialogue. The policymakers and the change makers have got to be in dialogue together, because otherwise the politicians will get frightened and reach for regulation, and the change makers will also get frightened and try and distance themselves from the policymakers, and neither will work. So we've got to get this right, and we're only going to get it right if we talk to each other.
I'm going to finish with this. As I was reviewing many of your interviews, as I mentioned earlier, as well as your keynotes, and then I was reading your book, you remain quite hopeful. In fact, you are very clear to say, and I think many world leaders might debate this with you, now is the best time to govern. And I took a step back, Mr. Blair, and I said to myself, what is the hope you want to be known for? Because you are focused on hope.
Well, I don't know I particularly want to be known for it, but I'm optimistic by nature. And I think it's important for political leaders to be kind of optimistic, really. I mean, as I think I say in the book, no one wants to get on a plane with a depressed pilot. So it's, you know, you want your leaders to, yeah. But I think the reason for my optimism is if you take a step back, I mean, okay, there are all these problems in the world, we've been discussing them, but you take a step back, you look at this region, there are more people lifted out of poverty than ever before in human history. There are opportunities. I mean, here we are in Singapore. You roll it back 50 years and look at this region and Singapore, and then look at it today. So, and this technology revolution does offer us the possibility of real huge advances in the quality of human life. So, and I think, you know, to be honest, you're always better. Of course, you've always got to watch the risk, and you've got to take account of the downside. I mean, I'm not sort of Panglossian about it, but I think you create the best societies when you're optimistic about the future, and countries only succeed when its people feel a confidence that the future is going to be better than the past. So I think this is the right spirit in which to engage, and even if there are frequent events and things that might make you pessimistic, I still think, as I say, when you take a step back and look at the broad sweep of history, humanity is doing better than it's ever done before, and I don't think there are problems that humanity with the right will and the right brain can't solve.
Mr. Blair, thank you for making this the pinnacle moment of Asia Summit. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Tony Blair.